buy Bitcoin, keep buying Bitcoin, don't sell the Bitcoin, ignore the noise. In this particular case, Bitcoin is a new asset class. It's digital money. Once you understand it's digital money, and you probably get there somewhere between 100 hours and 1,000 hours. Once you understand it's digital money, then you realize that the strategy is you just buy it and keep buying it and don't sell it. And I notice that most enthusiastic proposals to fix Bitcoin come from people that don't have any Bitcoin, right? And if you actually bet your entire country on Bitcoin, then you wouldn't be so enthusiastic to tinker with the network. You know, it seems pretty obvious that if you find 100 people that are intelligent enough to make $1 billion risk or $1 billion bet, they're the smart money. The smart money is buying Bitcoin because it is the crypto commodity network. It is the decentralized asset without an issuer, right? The dumb money is buying everything else. I think the lesson of Bitcoin is the best asset. There is no second best asset. Buy Bitcoin, keep buying Bitcoin, don't sell the Bitcoin, ignore the noise. But if someone studies Bitcoin for an hour, then they will watch the news for 1,000 days, and they will have 87 moments of anxiety during which they'll sell the Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin has a lot of those people. Like, they heard someone say buy it, and then they buy it. But if you would buy it because someone said it's a good idea, then you would sell it because someone said it was a bad idea, because you're not making your own decision. You're basically reacting to the crowd or sentiment or emotion. So a lot of people make investments based upon a recommendation from somebody else. And in the non-Bitcoin world, that's almost essential, because there's 10,000 stocks. Most people don't study. How many people spend 100 hours studying each of the S&P 500 stocks? Nobody. Okay, so if you own one of them, how many people spend 100 hours studying one stock that they own? 98% of people don't spend 100 hours studying the one stock. The stock analyst, the person that covers Apple, they spend 100 hours, and everybody else kind of outsources the thinking to that person and says the analyst put a buy rating on it, so I'll go ahead and take their recommendation, I'll buy the stock. And when the analyst puts a sell rating on it, they sell the stock.
In the last 15 years, Bitcoin has become significantly more popular, marking a paradigm shift as one of the world's most secure assets. Its popularity has grown immensely, primarily due to the control it grants to the holder. Moreover, Bitcoin undergoes a halving event every 4 years, making it rarer and more desirable. Recently, the Bitcoin ETF was approved, providing a legal framework for institutional and retail investors to engage in Bitcoin markets. This recognition has enhanced Bitcoin's legitimacy and acceptance in traditional financial systems. In one of his interviews, Michael Saylor spoke about the superiority of Bitcoin compared to other asset classes and why savvy billionaires are investing in Bitcoin. He emphasized why Bitcoin is the perfect store of value, possessing ideal characteristics for wealth preservation. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video, where Saylor offers compelling reasons for Bitcoin's superiority as an asset class, along with the rationale behind the approval of the Bitcoin ETF. So, if you want to stay up to date with Bitcoin and crypto, subscribe to our channel, it's free. Now, here is Saylor with his powerful insights about Bitcoin.
So, in this particular case, Bitcoin is a new asset class. It's digital money. Once you understand it's digital money, and you probably get there somewhere between 100 hours and 1,000 hours. Once you understand it's digital money, then you realize that the strategy is you just buy it and keep buying it and don't sell it until you have to pay a medical bill, or until it's an urgent life or death matter where you just have to sell it. But otherwise, you just keep accumulating, and you wait for all of the chaos and entropy and inefficiency and disorder that undermines every other asset to take hold. The longer the time goes on, the more difficult and the more disorder there is, and the more people appreciate the value of good money. So people struggle with new protocols. And so if I come up with a new protocol which is an order of magnitude better or 2 orders of magnitude better, right? You have to migrate the institutions, the governments, the individuals, and oftentimes you have to have a generational shift. Bitcoin represents a new economic protocol, a new monetary protocol. So you have 5,000 years of recorded history during which humanity has functioned with defective money. And you didn't, and every book on economics, by whether it was an Austrian economist or whether it was a fiat economist or any kind of economist or political economist or the like, every single book was written in a world where the money was mathematically defective. And it's impossible for you to appreciate the theoretical sound money or proper money until you've seen an example of one, right? You have to see one clean money. The Austrians, the only model they had was gold, but we knew that, but you couldn't make the argument in favor of perfected money using gold as an example, because gold actually suffered or created hyperinflation in Spain, in the 16th century. So someone could say, well, look, even in the gold standard, they had hyperinflation. So I guess gold's not perfect, so then my paper money is okay. I think after 5,000 years of the billions of people all writing about politics and economics based upon defective money, it's not surprising that it takes more than 15 years from the first theoretical establishment of proper money before people start to absorb the idea of clean, sound money, right? I mean, like there's not a single PhD economist that actually went to school in the era of perfected money, right? And I use the phrase, or the example of Dr. Harvey, and he discovered that the heart pumps blood out through the arteries, back through the veins, and that it circulates through the body. He discovered that after thousands of years of belief that the blood did not circulate. And when he presented it to the world of medicine, he was castigated and rejected by every learned medical professional. And he famously said, nobody over the age of 40 will ever believe me. No doctor over the age of 40 will ever accept this. I'm just going to have to wait for them all to die. And now we've got to move on to the next thing. And it's not easy to turn your entire worldview upside down, inside out, even if it gives you a 10 or 100x advantage over the traditional view.
So what is the ideal government and its role with money?
I think Bitcoin provides an inspired example, as does nature. For example, your DNA in nature transmits all that's necessary for the future of the species. And so from a small strand of DNA, millions and millions of creatures can form, and those, whether it's birds, they kind of come out knowing how to fly, or a spider knows how to spin a web, or, a fish knows how to swim. You look at them and you're like, well, how'd they figure that out? And it starts with a strand of DNA. And you basically inject the most elegant protocol, elegant piece of code into nature, subject to the laws of physics and the laws of nature, and then life manifests. And it's beautiful, right? Whether it's a tree or a bird or your dog, right? With regard to Bitcoin, you have the most elegant piece of code, a very elegant protocol, right? With not that many lines of code. It's like a virus or like a strand of DNA. It's a genetic code for a system, a trust network, a money network, an energy network. It gets released and it spreads to 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 1 million people, 10 million people, 100 million people, and it metastasizes and it moves through corporations and governments and nonprofits and the like. And And how is it distinguished from every other crypto? It's not more complicated, it's simpler. Right? Everybody else looks and says, I have to make it more complicated, and they break it. Right? So why is Bitcoin great? Because it is elegantly profound and decentralized. And I think that the more participants we have, the less likely it is that someone will corrupt the network. I think that if you have powerful companies and powerful owners in 100 different countries, the network is less likely to be corrupted. Its integrity is enhanced because now you have strong political actors with a vested interest to keep anybody from attacking the network. So I don't really think if fill in the blank, if a country in the Middle East decided that they wanted to buy a lot of Bitcoin, I don't think they're taking over Bitcoin, because 99% of the Bitcoin is in someone else's hands, and they triple the price of Bitcoin. And so the 99% of the people that hold the rest of Bitcoin just got 3 times as powerful. And so there's no way for someone to join the network and undermine the network. They're strengthening the network as they join it. What they would do is, if a big player in the Middle East joined the network and became embedded and had skin in the game, if the US government took an adverse position, you would have another sovereign that would take the opposite position. Mm-hmm. So if you're worried about one country or one company having an influence, then the best thing that could possibly happen is have 10 other companies in 10 other countries, because now you have a network of interdependencies and you have checks and balances. I think that we've got more and more checks and balances, and as people invest more in the network, they become more conservative, and they will resist, enthusiastic proposals to fix Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Right? It's like it's very easy. I notice that most enthusiastic proposals to fix Bitcoin come from people that don't have any Bitcoin. Right? And if you actually bet your entire country on Bitcoin, then you wouldn't be so enthusiastic to tinker with the network. If you bet your entire company on Bitcoin, then you wouldn't want to tinker. So ironically, these bigger actors are actually more conservative. They like it because they can trust it, and they can trust it because no one's changing it. I think that there's no way for any one actor to get control of the network. All you can do is empower the rest of the network by a factor of 100, and owning a lot of Bitcoin doesn't really give you power. I mean, the network, right. The network is stabilized by a combination of computer power, electric power, political power, economic power, right? And transactional power. So, Coinbase and Cash App have power, but that's different than the BlackRock power. And that's different than the Marathon or the Riot or all the Bitcoin mining power. And that's different than the power of all the node runners. And that's different than the power of the regulators or the politicians that support it. And so there's a lot of different power in the network, and it's just getting more decentralized. Now it just turns out that instead of the traditional Bitcoin voices from 2020, you still got them, but you've also got voices from Fidelity and BlackRock and other players, and you've got voices from the senators and the Congress people that support them, and you've got voices of the regulator that approved the ETF. That's not fewer voices, that's more voices. And the only reason that Bitcoin was approved as an ETF is the consensus that it's a commodity. The fundamental distinction of a commodity is it's an asset without an issuer. Mm-hmm. And that means that it has to be the consensus of everybody in the world. There isn't one single voice that can change the protocol, speak for the protocol, or is even relevant, right? If there isn't anybody, none of these buyers could speak for it. So now you've got this interesting logical conundrum. the person that bought the $1 billion of Bitcoin is too stupid to understand why they bought it, and that's why they gave you their money. After 15 years of not wanting to buy it, they all of a sudden, they bought it not knowing why for stupid reasons. Or the person that bought it looked at it, studied it, and came to a rational conclusion that they would actually invest $1 billion because they thought that they couldn't change it and no one else could change it. Right? And you know, it seems pretty obvious that if you find 100 people that are intelligent enough to make $1 billion risk or $1 billion bet, they're the smart money. The smart money is buying Bitcoin because it is the crypto commodity network. It is the decentralized asset without an issuer, right? The dumb money is buying everything else.
So, there is Michael Saylor, sharing his powerful insights about Bitcoin. Throughout his discussion with Natalie, Saylor emphasizes that Bitcoin is for everybody, and that smart money is actively investing in Bitcoin. Bitcoin provides decentralization, security, control, ownership, and long-term value preservation. These features set it apart from traditional assets. Understanding these benefits can help individuals make more informed investment decisions and take better control of their financial strategies. If you enjoy financial content, please subscribe to our channel, like, comment, and share the video. Anyway, guys, I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and that provided you with some value. I will see you all on the next one, and as always, all the best.